promoting dialogue.
It's midday in Dakar, 1 p.m. in Abuja. Good afternoon and welcome to West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting on 94.9 FM and worldwide on wadr.org. This is a Newslink, and first our headline stories. The Gambia's Human Rights Commission advocates ratification of the optional protocol to the Convention Against Torture.
So our today's process, therefore, is twofold. One, to create awareness on OPCAT, and two, to do advocacy for the ratification of OPCAT.
Ghana's finance minister rejects the central bank's request for over $3 billion bailout package. Cote d'Ivoire's parliament adopts a bill ratifying organization of civil society, and Nigeria and Nigeria, two neighboring countries, take steps to repair strained relations in the aftermath of the July 2023 coup in Niamey. Please stay tuned for details of these stories and more.
Here is Abdullahi Hassan with Newslink.
Many thanks for joining our broadcast, and a warm welcome to our listeners within and outside the sub-region. We begin in the Gambia, where the National Human Rights Commission held a one-day advocacy meeting for the ratification of the optional protocol to the Convention Against Torture and the establishment of a national preventive mechanism in the country. The meeting aims to popularize the legal documents to ratify them. WADR's Banjul correspondent Sankule Janko has more.
In 2023, the Gambia enacted the Prevention and Prohibition of Torture Act 2023, which in part domesticates the Convention Against Torture ratified in September 2018. The act provides a domestic framework for the prosecution of torture cases, and it recognizes the NHRC as one of the institutions that torture allegations can be reported to. However, the Gambia has neither signed nor ratified the optional protocol to the Convention Against Torture, OPCAT, which entered into force in June 2006. Consequently, it has not yet established the National Preventive Mechanism, NPM. In view of the above, the NHRC organized a one-day advocacy meeting to raise awareness on the OPCAT and the importance of establishing a country-specific NPM. Junto Drame is a commissioner of the Human Rights Commission.
So our today's process, therefore, is twofold. One, to create awareness on OPCAT, and two, to do advocacy for the ratification of OPCAT. And when we do that, then the state would also then establish the national preventive mechanism, or mechanism, so to speak, at the state level.
Meanwhile, the Solicitor General and Legal Secretary of the Gambia, Hussein Tamasi, reiterated the government's commitment to ratifying international conventions.
The ratification of OPCAT is important because it is not only a step towards aligning our legal framework with international standards, but also to demonstrate our seriousness as a country in getting rid of torture in all its forms and making culprits accountable.
The Human Rights Commission hopes that the government will ratify and sign the optional protocol to the Convention Against Torture in the nearest future.
WADR's Banjul correspondent Sankule Janko reporting there. Elsewhere in Ghana, the Minister of Finance has shut down the central bank's request for 53 billion cedis or $3 billion bailout package. Instead, the ministry has suggested the selling of the newly built central bank's headquarters and the exploration of internal solutions. The Bank of Ghana has been reeling from a 70 billion cedis loss, largely due to a 50% cut from the controversial domestic debt exchange program under the former government. The Minister of Finance, Dr. Kassel Ato-Forson, insists the government cannot step in just yet. However, financial experts say the move does not only leave the central bank in financial turmoil, but also puts Ghana on a collision course with the International Monetary Fund, IMF. The IMF had expected the government and central bank to work out a recapitalization plan, but with no bailout in sight. Tensions are mounting on how the regulator will restore its financial health. Here is Ghana's Minister of Finance, Dr. Ato-Forson.
Bank of Ghana had generated so much debt, so much deficit. As a result, their balance sheet is not healthy, and that they have generated negative equity. Apparently, the previous administration and the Bank of Ghana had signed an MOU for the government of Ghana or the taxpayer to recapitalize the central bank with 53 billion Ghana cedis. I've asked the Bank of Ghana to look within and cut expenditure because the taxpayer cannot afford 53 billion. I've communicated that to them. First of all, they have to look within. You've seen their new head office, very big building. They have a choice to sell and lease back. If they want to, they have to look within and cut expenditure and reduce. The taxpayer cannot afford 53 billion Ghana cedis. Giving 53 billion Ghana cedis to the central bank will simply mean that we will have to deny the taxpayer some public good, like roads, like schools, like hospitals. Is that what we want? Can we afford it at this stage? The question is no. The answer is no. We cannot be able to afford that.
Dr. Carson Atto-Forson is Ghana's Minister of Finance.
More stories coming up on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
As a reminder, we are live on WADR.org and on Facebook and YouTube at WADR. Nigeria's House of Representatives has taken steps to address obstacles affecting investment and economic relations between Nigeria and China. The chairman of the House Committee on Nigeria-China Parliamentary Relations, Jafaru Yakubu, announced this at the unveiling of the Nigeria-China Sustainable Business Bilateral Trade and Investment Summit in the nation's capital. Our Abuja correspondent, Usman Umar, completes the story.
Yakubu identified the ease of doing business as a major challenge hindering seamless trade and investment between both nations. To tackle this, he said the committee has engaged a consulting firm to organize business summits in Lagos and China, after which a report will be submitted to the National Assembly.
Our ultimate goal is to establish a feedback mechanism that informs a legislative agenda of ease of doing business, enhancing ease of doing business between Nigeria and China.
Nigeria's Minister of Foreign Affairs, represented by the Director of Economy, Trade and Investment, Ambassador Bolaji Akinyemi, emphasized the importance of fostering innovation and creating investment-friendly policies to strengthen bilateral ties.
For decades, Nigeria and China have built a strong economic partnership, with China playing a vital role as a strategic investor in infrastructure, manufacturing, and trade. However, the time has come to move beyond transactional engagement and embrace a new era of strategic and sustainable and mutually beneficial cooperation.
Since formalizing relations in 1971, cooperation between Nigeria and China has expanded in energy, manufacturing, and defense. While China is a key trading partner, concerns over trade imbalances and debt sustainability remain. For Newslink on West Africa Democracy Radio, Usman Umar reporting from Abuja.
Well, more on parliamentary matters. The Ivorian National Assembly has adopted by a majority vote the bill ratifying the ordinance relating to the organization of civil society. This order requires the promotion of gender in the governing bodies of CSOs, the presentation of an annual activity report, and sets conditions for the receipt of donations. This law has already been rejected by the Ivorian Church, which fears an attack on religious freedom and state interference in religious affairs. But for the Ivorian authorities, it is a question of fighting more effectively against money laundering and the financing of terrorism. More details of Albin Adis' report, voiced by Imo Edet.
While religious organizations perceive this ordinance as potential state interference in their financial management, the Ivorian government spokesperson seeks to provide reassurance. The executive branch is exercising one of its sovereign rights, according to Amadou Coulibaly.
There is no intrusion by the executive branch. The executive has the right, and this is also part of those sovereign prerogatives, to oversee the operations of all associations and structures that function from other countries. We aim to introduce transparency at all levels of the nation, including the management of NGOs.
Coulibaly also emphasized that the focus is on ensuring transparency within civil society organizations in a world grappling with money laundering and the financing of terrorism.
We cannot advocate for transparency everywhere and then shy away from its path. We must be consistent. Regarding NGOs, there is a necessity, especially at a time when the entire world is combating money laundering and the financing of terrorism, to scrutinize the management of these NGOs. This is simply about establishing order. If they have nothing to hide, there is no reason why they should not open up their accounts and allow us to see the sources of their funding. This is merely about enforcing transparency and better organizing a sector that needs to be regulated and structured.
Religious organizations have criticized the lack of prior consultation before the ordinance was adopted. They believe such an approach would have allowed the text to be better tailored to the specificities of religious organizations. It is worth noting that opposition lawmakers voted against the adoption of this ordinance.
A report by WADR's Albin Ade in Abidjan and voiced in our studios by Imo Edet. And now to the Sahel. The Nigerian Minister of Foreign Affairs hosted the Nigerian ambassador in Niamey on Wednesday. The meeting took place amid a tense diplomatic climate between Niamey and Abuja, particularly concerning cross-border security issues. Discussions between the two officials focused on strategies to restore dialogue between the two nations. Here's a report by Augustine Kole.
The Nigerian Minister of Foreign Affairs, Bakari Yau Sangari, and Ambassador Mohammed Sani Usman deliberated on bilateral cooperation with a special emphasis on combating crime and terrorism. A key topic of discussion was Nigeria's newly implemented border control measures, which have raised concerns in Niamey. Both parties agreed to hold consultations regarding these measures while reaffirming their shared commitment to collaborate against the threat of terrorism. This meeting occurs against the backdrop of regional instability, just over a month after Burkina Faso, Mali, and Niger officially withdrew from ECOWAS. From March 8 to the 10th, Ghana's new president John Mahama visited the AES countries, advocating for dialogue to prevent a complete fracture between the two blocs. Relations between Niamey and Abuja have been strained since the July 2023 coup led by General Abdurrahman Chiani. Nigeria supported ECOWAS sanctions and the threat of military intervention, while General Chiani accused Nigeria and France of attempting to destabilize his regime. Amid this shifting landscape in the Sahel and significant tensions, Nigeria and Niger are taking a new step towards dialogue to ease their differences.
Augustine Kole with that report filed in by our Niamey correspondent, Murtala Zuberu. Still in the Sahel, Burkina Faso's army has established a commissary to meet the specific logistical and social needs of its members and their families by providing them with essential products at affordable prices. As one of the key measures of the Council of Ministers this Wednesday, the Burkinabe government has established a Defense Forces and Security Forces ECOMAT. For the executive, it is a mechanism of logistical and social support adapted to the needs of the defense forces and security officials. The army says this measure is in response to combatant forces and their families facing difficulties accessing consumer goods and essential equipment. It hopes that this will have a direct impact on their morale and operational effectiveness. According to the government, the creation of a commissary for the benefit of the army says, and I quote, "It is an initiative intended to relieve the burden on personnel of the defense forces as well as their families by providing product at affordable prices." And before the recap, let's take you to Mali, where a close associate of the influential Islamic scholar Imam Mahmoud Diko has been released. The release of Dauda Magasa after he was kidnapped earlier this year raised many questions within the country about the tense political climate. Here's a report by Christopher Ticho.
Kidnapped on February 5, 2025 by unidentified men, Dauda Magasa is said to have been released on March 11. This release comes amid a tense political climate marked by rising tensions between the Malian authorities and Imam Diko's supporters. Dauda Magasa was an influential member of the Coordination of Movement Associations and Sympathizers of Imam Mahmoud Diko, SIMAS, an organization founded by the Malian cleric in 2019. He played a key role, particularly in the management of religious affairs and political organization. He was also a member of the Imam Dicko Support Commission, strengthening his close ties with the latter. His kidnapping came ahead of Imam Dicko's scheduled return to Mali from his exit in Algeria since December 2023. Dicko was to return to Mali on February 14, 2025, but for several months, his relative had been denouncing repression, leading to the arrest of several of them while they were organizing his reception in Bamako. This reinforced fears of Dicko's possible arrest upon his return. Despite the pressure, Mahmoud Dicko continued to enjoy international recognition. In November 2022, he was appointed by a permanent member of the board of the Muslim World League, a Saudi-based organization influential in the Muslim world, cementing his status as a leading religious authority. The arrest of several close associates and the dissolution of Simas suggest a hostile climate upon his return, with Dauda Magasa's release seen as a sign of appeasement. However, some experts say this is a sign that the transitional authorities could be monitoring Dicko's network before any further action against him or his supporters.
A report by our Bamako correspondent Aliyu Chairman, voiced here by Christopher Atichu. You are listening to Newslink here on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal, and online on wadr.org. Here's a reminder of our top stories. The Gambian Human Rights Commission advocates ratification of the optional protocol to the Convention Against Torture. Ghana's finance minister rejects the central bank's request for a $3 billion bailout package. Cote d'Ivoire's parliament adopts a bill ratifying organization of civil society. Nigeria and Niger, two neighboring countries, take steps to repair strained relations in the aftermath of the July 2023 coup in Niamey. Ahead in the news, we have the press review, guest interview, and sports news. Please stay with us.
Fresh and breaking news all the time. Hear it first as the news breaks, only on West Africa Democracy Radio. Newslink continues.
Many thanks for staying with us. Let's take you to Sierra Leone, where President Julius Maada Bio has dismissed the head of the Immigration Service days after footage was published showing him receiving a birthday gift from a fugitive Dutch drug kingpin. The footage of Alucine Kani being handed a present by Johan Lejakers, which has not been independently verified, was published by the investigative outlet Follow the Money and Dutch newspaper Allegem Dagblad on Friday. The dinner is understood to have been held in an upmarket restaurant in Freetown, Sierra Leone capital. Lejakers, 33, one of Europe's most wanted fugitive, was sentenced in absentia to 24 years in prison for drug smuggling by a Rotterdam court last June. Kane was relieved of his duties the same day the reports were published, but authorities in Freetown did not disclose the reason for his dismissal in a short statement by the presidential secretary.
This is the newspaper review. Stay abreast and find out what the top stories are in your country.
This is the newspaper review.
The newspaper review.
For today's press review, let's join Eche Atisu in Accra, the Ghanaian capital, for major and banner headlines on the dailies.
Thank you and welcome to the press review here in Ghana. The first newspaper is the Daily Graphic newspaper, and the banner headline for the Daily Graphic newspaper says, Mahama Cares launched medical initiative to support cancer, kidney and heart patients. So that's the launch of the Mahama Cares. Also, Gold Coast Refinery Lord's Gold Board initiative. Other stories on the front page of the Daily Graphic are budget response to business communities' concerns, Ashanti region outages caused by faulty underground cables. That's it for the Daily Graphic newspaper. I'll take you to the Daily Guide newspaper with banner headline, Ofori Atta sues police officers for raiding home, and also 5 killed over illegal logging at Sishi. Also, Akwetia MP deserves hearing, that's according to the Supreme Court, and also Cecilia Dape's maid weeps in court.
The Ghanaian Times newspaper says key nuclear regulatory experts desert job for greener pastures. That's a headline story on the Ghanaian Times newspaper. Other stories are President Mahama backs 20-day ceasefire in Russia-Ukraine war. Let me take you to the New Crusading Guide newspaper now. It says Ken Uforiata sues national security operatives over illegal invasion of residence. Also, tension mounts at Boso over police interference in chieftaincy issues. Also, family petitions IGP over murder at Adenta Japan Motors. Our next newspaper is the Daily Post newspaper, and the headline story says there's no freeze on employment. That's according to the finance minister. And also, Mahama forms special task force to fight flooding in Ghana. And also here on the Daily Post newspaper, Brigadier General Maxwell Mante appointed as new NACOC Director General. The Daily Banner newspaper says minority vows to resist gold board, says it's another create, loot and share scheme. Also, Mahama backs Ukraine seas war deal. And our final newspaper is the Daily Searchlight newspaper. It says President Mahama chases out Registrar General, blocks her from office with personnel from national security. Other stories are all are corrupt. Don't tag politicians alone. That's according to the minority leader, Alexander Afenyo-Markin. And also curfew on Wali Wali and its environs reviewed. That's according to the Daily Searchlight newspaper. That brings us to the end of the press review here in Accra. It's back to you in the studio in Dakar.
Many thanks, Eche Atiso.
Politics, analyses on major news, social matters, and all. This is A Guest.
Well, we'll still remain in Ghana as our guest, economist Dr. Evans Nuno joins us from Accra about the most recent development in the financial sector, which is the Ministry of Finance rejection of 53 billion cedis or $3 billion bailout package requested by the Central Bank of Ghana. Since that news went viral, experts have expressed mixed reactions about the executive's decision and argued the many ways that such a move could affect Ghana's economy, the country's agreement with the IMF, and its debt restructuring program. But Dr. Evans Nuno holds a different perspective.
I think it's a step in the right direction. In 2022, the Bank of Ghana allowed itself for their independence to be compromised because the Bank of Ghana did excessive monetary financing, and that brought us to where we are now. So they ran into negative balances, and Dr. Ernest Addison and his team should have known that it was for a good reason we gave them that independence. So if they did not manage their things well, they financed activities of the government excessively, and they ran into negatives, and that triggered inflation, and inflation got to as high as over 50%. So this new government is targeting to bring inflation as low as 11%. And I'm not too sure they have time to be dishing out monies unnecessarily. So if the Bank of Ghana knew that it had run into negatives and still decided to put up a new building and would now request the government to bail it out, I don't think it's economically prudent. So I side with the minister's position, the government's position.
We don't completely know what the CBN needs this extra money for. It could be for other reasons. And there are experts like yourself who have already reacted, saying that this could really set a new course, a collision course between Ghana and the IMF and other creditors in the area of debt restructuring.
If anything at all, what the government is doing should rather make IMF happy, because IMF wouldn't want Ghana to spend anyhow, to throw money fruitless ventures. Remember, the government did not reject the request. It only gave a directive that, yes, you are right, we have to bail you out, but sell the building we helped you to build, and then use the money for that purpose. But if, for example, if you were asking about the removal of those taxes, the e-levy and the rest, then I can easily say that the Bank of Ghana would only look at alternatives. Otherwise, they can easily have problems with us. But with this directive that the Bank of Ghana should sell their building and use that to help themselves out, I don't think that it should give us any problem with the IMF.
So at least we now know, according to you, that the government is as much as possible trying to be prudent and avoid wasteful spendings. But the Minister of Energy, John Jinafo, announced that the government will soon construct Ghana's second largest gas processing plant. Do you think all of this put together will help stabilize Ghana even more?
Yes, I think the government is intentionally working on key areas of the economy that will help us to achieve stability in terms of our macroeconomic indicators. And the energy sector is a key area or a crucial area to consider. So I think that it is good that the government is attempting to do that. And I think once they are intentional about it, they can do, because they decide where our resources must be. That will help us to stabilize, because instability or distortion in the energy sector would have a trickling effect throughout the other sectors of the economy. Electricity, transportation, everything that has to do with energy would translate into inflated prices. And that once we are attempting to stabilize prices and to achieve macroeconomic stability, I think that it's important that we look at that sector.
Dr. Evans, known as a Ghanaian economist. Sankule Janko is up next with updates from the sporting world.
Hello out there, a warm welcome and thank you for joining us. Dr. Patrice Motsepe has been re-elected unopposed as president of the Confederation of African Football CAF for a second 4-year term. The decision was confirmed at the 11th CAF Extraordinary General Assembly in Cairo on Wednesday, extending his leadership of the organization until 2029. Motsepe's re-election comes after a first term widely praised for stabilizing CAF's finances and boosting its global profile. Under his leadership, the organization set several new records at the Africa Cup of Nations AFCON Côte d'Ivoire 2023, attracting a record 1.4 billion viewers worldwide according to CAF official website. Prize money for major tournaments, including the CAF Champions League and CAF Women's Africa Cup of Nations, has also increased significantly, alongside enhanced financial support for member associations. The 63-year-old faced no opposition after the nomination deadline passed in November 2024. His decision to run again followed requests from member association presidents and key stakeholders, according to media reports. Elsewhere, the under-17 women's team of Côte d'Ivoire achieved a remarkable feat by turning the tables against Burundi in the second round of the 2025 FIFA Under-17 Women's World Cup qualifiers. After losing 3-1 at home in the first leg, the Young Elephants responded with a clinical 3-0 win in the return match on Wednesday to secure passage in the third and final round of qualifiers. And in Europe, Real Madrid secured qualification into the round of 16 after a 4-2 penalty shootout win against city rivals Atletico Madrid. The Los Blancos will take on Arsenal in the quarterfinals as they are keen on defending their title. And that's it for sports. It's back to you.
And that's how we wrap up this edition of Newslink here on West Africa Democracy Radio, broadcasting from Dakar, Senegal. Thank you for listening, and many thanks to Mustafa Sek and Sheikh Kinjai for the technical assistance. Do interact with us via social media platforms, X, Instagram at WADR English, and on Facebook, WADR English Service. We also stream live on WADR.org. Coming up at the bottom of the hour is a replay of environmental program in English and Varoscope, to be followed by the second edition of the news in French Info Chez Vous at the top of the hour of 1 p.m. with Demba Amaran. I'm Abdullahi Hassan. Good afternoon.
And many thanks to you for listening to Newslink via Hot 104.3 FM, New Me FM 94.0.